All right. 1 Corinthians chapter 9 this morning. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Here's something a little bit different, though. Most mornings, you will find me at the coffee shop. I try to smile as I make your coffee. I'm tired. I work 6 or 7 days a week so I can pay my rent and feed my family. My mother died a few years ago, and life hasn't really had meaning or direction since then. My girlfriend tries to help, but her husband died a few years ago, and she's still trying to figure out how to live with that. We're probably not helping each other much. I'm an alcoholic. I know that doesn't help, but it's where I am at the moment. I've tried to kill myself a couple of times. I failed. I'll probably try again. I'm glad you and your family are going to church today. I might like to go, but if I don't work, I don't get paid. I'll be here when you're done. Probably. I wish I could tell you that's fiction. It's not. It's a real person with real pain and real problems. How do we help them? How do we help them? The answer, I think, is in 1 Corinthians 9 as we try to bridge the reality divide. The divide between a reality that is horrible and possibility of what could be. And the question I want to answer this morning is, and as I wrote those words and thought about this person's life, the question that came to my mind was, whatever happened to being all things to all people so that we could reach some? When did it become all people must become one thing to us so that we could reach them? When did the onus become on them to become a Christian instead of us being Christians reaching out to them? And I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know that it's one that we need to discover the answer to. I don't think we're going to solve this on the broader church basis for Christians in general. Frankly, I don't want to. What I'm most interested in, how do I solve this for me, and how do we solve this for us? This divide is one that we must see before us in order to bridge it. Paul was writing in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, and I want to begin in verse 19, just a few verses this morning. For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win the more. And to the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might win the Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, as without law, not being without law toward God, but under law toward Christ, that I might win those who are without law. To the weak I became as weak, that I might win the weak. I've become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. Now this I do for the gospel's sake, that I might be partaker of it with you. Paul said, I have become all things to all men, that I might save some. So we think about that thought. There is challenges all throughout it. What does it take? What does it require to become all things to all men? You think about the Apostle Paul. Now we think about his life and we think about who he was. Paul was uniquely situated to be the man that he was in the place that he was. Paul was from Tarsus, a city outside of Israel, a Greek city. He was a Roman citizen. He was a Jew. He was a Pharisee. He was a well-trained, well-learned Jewish Pharisee, Jewish scholar. He had a lot of zeal, a lot of energy, a lot of dedication to Judaism until he got saved. But you think about the Apostle Paul, he Jewish, Roman, Greek, all of these things combined. Paul could go on a Saturday into the synagogue and he could debate with Jewish scholars and rabbis in Hebrew on Saturday. And then he could turn around Sunday and go to Mars Hill and debate with the Greek philosophers in Greek. He could go into the courtroom on Monday and debate with Roman lawyers in Latin. He was uniquely situated. He had experience in all of these different cultural contexts. He had experience in all of these different things that he knew. He was able to become weak, as he talked about. He was not a robust, strong man. Though he walked around the ocean, around the empire rather, he knew what it was to have some fears and some phobias. Having been shipwrecked a few times, Paul later in his life really had some hydrophobia going on. He literally sent people across the Mediterranean and he walked around it. Wasn't going to go there another time. He knew what it was to have physical infirmities. Best we can tell, Paul suffered from a severe case of myopia, nearsighted, to the point of virtually blind. And so he would have had somebody that would have had to lead him around. He would have had somebody he had to write for him because he couldn't even see to write. The big sign-off in his books, he would say, here's how you know it's mine. In the original manuscripts, he would actually sign them himself, but he wrote with big letters because that's all he could see. And so Paul knew what it was. And yet Paul knew strength as well. He knew academic strengths. He knew oratorial strengths. He knew argumentative strengths. He knew how to teach and to preach. You think that services get long here. Paul one time started a service in the evening. Guy died at midnight. He raised him from the dead, kept going until dawn. I've never gone 13 hours. And yet he did. And he could. And with the exception of one guy who fell asleep somewhere in the middle, apparently everybody stayed engaged. We would have been, that service would have had to run on Duncan. We have that. And so Paul had all of these abilities, all of these strengths. And we sometimes look at that and we think about it and we're like, well, yeah, Paul could become all things to all people because he had a lot to offer. And the question we need to think about for ourselves is, what do we have to offer? What things do you know? What experiences do you have? What weaknesses do you have? What strengths do you have that allow you to talk and to become those things to the people around you? Because see, Paul was and the inclination we need to stop to think about it is not to act. It's to be authentic. Paul was authentically Greek. He was authentically Roman. He was authentically Jewish. He was authentically smart. One thing that Paul couldn't do authentically, he couldn't pull off stupid. Paul couldn't pull off stupid if he tried. There were other things that Paul couldn't be. So what things authentically can we be? And I'm not talking about how can we act, but what things do we know? What interests do we have? What abilities do we have? What weaknesses do we have? What strengths do we have? Because all of those things allow us to become those things to somebody else. If I struggle not with quite the myopia that he did. I understand, though, what it is to not be able to see well. On the average day, despite the fact that I just saw my eye doctor, on the average day, I can't figure out a configuration of things on my eyes to make me see it well anymore. My eyes have devolved to that point. It just doesn't happen. So I've got contacts in and reading glasses on, and somewhere between the two of them, I get by. I have my other glasses. I've met people who struggle with their vision. I can relate. Interests. I love coffee. You've probably picked up on that over the years. And there's some interests that I have there. What interests do you have? What hobbies do you have? What strengths do you have that you can talk to people who have those strengths? What weaknesses do you have? Sometimes we think, oh, I can't. I have only negatives in my life. Well, okay, but okay, if you have only negatives in your life, there are other people who have a lot of negatives. You can become something to those people. You could say, I struggle with depression. Fine. Then struggle with depression and talk to the people around you who struggle with depression. I know people who struggle with depression, who struggle with you ever had anybody have a panic attack in front of you? It is freaky weird. You know what the worst thing about it is? I've never had one, and I'm thankful. So I can't relate. It's like people who have motion sickness. You ever get motion sick? Seasick, car sick, whatever sick? I've never been motion sick. I don't understand what it feels like. I don't get it. And part of my mind thinks it's made up, except that a significant amount of my family deal with motion sickness. The seas could be calm, the seas could be rough. It doesn't bother me. Cars, I read from New Jersey to Colorado in the back seat of a car. 3 days, solid, nose into a book. Didn't bother me a bit. But you get motion sick, you can talk to people who, I can't talk to anybody about motion sickness because I'm going to come off as very judgmental and very insensitive. And I am, because I've never experienced it. Panic attack, same thing. But if you have these things in your life, you can begin to talk to people about those things. Your weaknesses can become a part of becoming all things to all men. Your strengths can become a part of becoming all things to all men. The things that you know can become a part of that. The things that you don't know can become a part of that. The things that you're interested in can become a part of that. The things that you hate can become a part of that. Every part of our lives can become a part of becoming all things to all men so that we might by all means save some. What does it require of us, though, for those things to become a part of becoming all things? It requires of us being aware. Being aware. I think sometimes that we are so wrapped up in our schedule, and we're all busy. So wrapped up in our interests, so wrapped up in what we're doing, that we fail or forget to realize that those things translate into gospel opportunities, that we can become all things to all people that have similar problems or similar strengths or similar interests. It's just a matter of awareness. Sometimes we forget that other people are out there. You go to Dunkin' Donuts this afternoon and you order your coffee and somebody screws it up, because that happens with some regularity. When you make 1 million cups of coffee a day, you're going to blow a couple of them. And our first instinct is to get angry because they messed up our coffee. How about the other person on the other side of the counter might be dealing with something and they were distracted for a second? And what's going on in their life is probably more important than the cup of coffee they messed up. But it takes awareness for us to get past saying, my coffee's bad, to say, they might be having a bad day. They might be having a bad year. They might be having a bad decade. And maybe my coffee being messed up is not that big a deal. It's just having some awareness. Awareness allows us to become all things to all men so that we might by all means save some. But is awareness really enough? Is awareness enough? Can we really authentically become all things to all men? And the answer is really no. Paul actually in the text gave us some limitations on this. There are some limitations that he placed on this. And so we see the first one. He says, look, to the Jews, I became as a Jew. To those who are under the law, I became as under the law. He didn't say I became under the law. Because as Paul was trying to minister to Jews, to people who were still living under the law of Moses, did he place himself back under the law? No. He was still free. And so there's some limitations. Paul said, I can't go back to this place. I can't go back to a place of legalism. I can't become something I'm not. But when you think about freedom, do you have to exercise all the freedoms you have all the time? No. Is that inauthentic? No. I could stand up here and say anything I wanted to, but would that help you if I stand up here, say, oh, we're just all stupid? This is hypothetical. I could say that. I'm not. And browbeat you and tell you you have to live under the law. Paul said, I'm not going to go there. But what he did do was voluntarily restrain some of his freedoms, voluntarily not exercise some of his freedoms. He talked about in 1 Corinthians about the whole thing about eating meat. He's like, I can eat whatever I want to eat. But there are some situations where what I eat actually will impact my ability to be a witness. And so he says, when I get in those situations, I voluntarily don't eat that. Why? Because he was under the law? No. But because he might offend somebody who was, and he was trying to reach them, and they were more important than the hamburger he wanted to eat. Is there precedent for that other than Paul? Sure. You think about Jesus. Who is Jesus? He is the Son of God, and he is God the Son. How much authority did Jesus have as he walked on planet Earth? Well, he said to the apostles, all authority is given to me. How much of Jesus' divinity did he have as he walked on planet Earth? All of it. And every once in a while, he flexed and you saw it. Like he hid himself and walked through a crowd one time. How did he hide himself? Well, he didn't really hide. He just walked. Either he became invisible or he stopped them from being able to see him. Problem solved, same thing. He just walked. How did he raise the dead? How did he do the things that he did? How did he take, one little dude's lunch and feed 20,000 people with it? How did he give sight to the blind and hearing? How did he command the demons? Because he was 100% God the entire time he was here. If you hear somebody that says, oh, Jesus laid aside his divinity, run. Because Jesus absolutely did not lay aside his divinity. He was 100% divine the entire time he was walking on planet Earth. And he was 100% man. And I don't understand how that works together, but I know that it's true. But did Jesus always use all of his divine attributes the whole time he was here? No. He didn't lay aside his divinity, but he freely restrained himself from using it. You think about the time he was hungry. The devil said, hey, just turn these stones to bread. Could Jesus have done that? Absolutely, in his wheelhouse. But he didn't do it. He voluntarily restrained the use of power that he had. Right? Hanging on the cross, legions of angels straining over the battlements of heaven, ready to come down. And with a word, he would have annihilated the human race. Did he do it? No. Because he valued the human race above even his own life. And so he died because it was what was necessary. He voluntarily laid aside, voluntarily did not exercise, rather, divine attributes. And so there is precedent for that. It is not in any way disingenuous. It is not in any way non-authentic to say, I have the freedom to do something, but in this situation, for the sake of the gospel, because I want to become all things to this person, I'm going to not do that. You don't have to rub people's noses in your freedom. It doesn't help win them. And so Paul says, as though those who were under the law became as under the law. And then he goes on and he said, but those who were without law, I became as without law. And then in parenthesis, but not without law toward Christ. Because there are people who are lawless and immoral. And Paul said, I went as far as I could to meet those people exactly where they were. He said, but there reaches a point where I can't go any further. I'm in relationship with Jesus, and if being in relationship with you is going to require me to sin, I can't cross that bridge. It's too far. But I'm going to get right to the edge of that bridge. I'm going to get as close to where you are as I can. I'm not going to join in with your sin, but I'm not going to judge you. I'm just going to join in with you. So can you really become all things to all people? No, there are some limitations to that. And we could call those philosophical, moral limitations, whatever they are. But being authentically becoming all things to all people, there are some limitations that we face. But there are other limitations that we face. You think about it. How many of you could walk into a biker bar and just hang out with everybody that's there and naturally fit in? Some of us, maybe we could. If I walked into a biker bar dressed like this, I'd probably fly out the window dressed like this. I could walk up to a dude sitting there in black leather and tatted all over the place, and I could enjoy the artwork on his arm, but he's going to look at me and go, wow, Prep and him. And though we could eventually sort that out relationally, I think, because I love those people too, that instant connection probably is not there. Because I can love a bike from afar. I don't know how to ride. And if it breaks down, I don't know how to fix it. All of the gearhead stuff that goes into that, it just escapes me. I'm one of those people that you get in the car, you turn the key. If it doesn't work, I'm in trouble. Because the amount of things I know how to do with it once it doesn't start are very limited. It's just who I am. You get somebody who is super into fishing. I can hang out with somebody who's super into fishing, but I don't eat fish, and I don't go fishing. So are we going to bond, and can we connect real tightly? Maybe, but not over fishing. Because there are some things in life that I cannot authentically become. They're just not part of who I am. You want to talk about coffee? Dude, we can totally connect. You want to talk about gaming? We can connect. You want to talk about menswear? Totally into that. The frustration of electronics? Get it, got it, good. There are some things that I authentically can just walk right into and embrace and hang out because it's part of who I am. But can I realistically become all things to all men when maybe those things are not any way authentic to me? And the answer is no. To a point, no. You ever seen Christians who look completely different than you? If I said to you the name John MacArthur, would you know who I was talking about? So John MacArthur is, though I would disagree with him in some points, he is a very well-respected Bible pastor, teacher kind of guy. He's an older gentleman, not old, but older, silver hair, slightly receding, always with a suit and tie kind of guy, rocks it pretty well, speaks to thousands of people, writes books, stuff goes on. John MacArthur has an audience of people. There are a lot of people that John MacArthur can reach by his presentation, by his appearance, by his skill set. Let me introduce you to another guy, John Cooper. Now, these two guys have something in common. Did you catch what it was? Their first name. They're both John. John MacArthur, John Cooper. Now, John Cooper has a large platform that he stands on as well. John Cooper is a Christian. He is outspoken. He has a beard and rocks a modern haircut. In fact, he likes his beard so much that he's got his own beard product line that he's now developed and launched. And you could buy John Cooper beard products. John Cooper, most times when you see him on a stage, you're probably going to see him with a bass guitar strapped to him. He's got a full sleeve on one arm and a partial sleeve rocking on the other arm. And he likes to wear shirts that are like sleeves ripped off so you can see his ink. And he stands up there with flames on the stage going all over the place and lights going all over the place. John Cooper is the lead singer of the band Skillet. So if you know them. Now, John Cooper, outspoken Christian. Very passionate Christian. If you get a chance to follow John Cooper on Twitter, Facebook, or whatever, do, because he's got some very good insights. Now, if you have in your mind even a picture of it, and you go home and look at these guys later, John MacArthur, John Cooper, two very different dudes. Two very different visuals. Guess what? They reach two very different audiences. Authentically. You see, the variety that we have within the church isn't a drawback. The variety of people that we have within the greater church is actually a necessity. The variety of people even that we have in this room is a necessity. Because John Cooper reaches people that John MacArthur can't. And John MacArthur reaches people that John Cooper can't. We are different, and that difference is a good thing. That difference is how we become all things to all men, so that we might by all means save some. Because the people that I can reach are different than the people that you can reach. The people that you can reach are maybe very different than the people that I can reach. Your interests are not my interests. Your skills are not my skills. Your strengths and your weaknesses are different than mine. And we are going to authentically connect and communicate with different people, and that's good. That's the way it should be. Our differences are a strength. They are a necessity. Because as we seek to become all things to all men, that we might by all means save some, it's going to take more than one of us to do that. And it's going to take more than one kind of us to do that. If we have any hope of bridging the reality gap, we have to become all things to all people, so that we might by all means save some. It's going to require awareness on our part of the people who are around us. It's going to take some authenticity on our part to embrace both our strengths and our weaknesses, so that we can connect with the people around us. And then it's going to take some allowance on our part, as we allow other Christians who maybe don't look like us, sound like us, smell like us, act like us, to authentically reach the people around them that we would never have any hopes of reaching. But it's only that way that we are going to bridge the reality gap. That allowance starts with letting other people be, not judging other Christians for who they are. If they stand before God, they don't stand before you. Stop judging them. It's not your job. But that awareness of owning my strengths and weaknesses, and being aware of the people around me, and the fact that they need to hear the gospel, they need to connect, and it's not a quick thing. You can't just walk into a complete stranger. Hey, did you know you're going to hell? You know what you're going to say? Well, you can too. Because in our culture, it's a lot more popular to tell somebody, it's a lot more permissible to tell somebody to go to hell than it is to tell them they're going to hell. It takes having some relational momentum most of the time. It takes sharing your strengths, sharing your weaknesses, sharing your interests. Constantly aware that in this process, somewhere along the line, as you become all things to all men, you might save some. How's the success rate very high? That's not what Paul said. I become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. We're going to have to expend a lot of energy and probably get a small return back. But that's okay. That's how it's always been. That's how it will always be. The alternative is to expend no energy or less energy and have no return, and fail to bridge the reality divide. And the people that we meet and the suffering that they endure day after day after day will just continue. You say, does Jesus really make that big a difference in a person's life? But you're sitting here this morning, so I'm going to assume that you think the answer is yes. I look at my life. What would my life be without Jesus? Not as good. We need to be convinced that he can make a difference in the people's lives around us. And then move on with some awareness. It's not a matter, Paul didn't say, all people have become one thing to us so that we might save some. He said, I've become all things to all people so that I might by all means save some. The onus is on us. It's not on them. The command was always go. It wasn't wait for them to come in. So as we start 251 years, it's kind of weird. We're entering our 251st year. And as we go in with some struggles, admittedly, the important thing for us as individuals, as a church, is to bridge that reality divide. It's to find the ways that we can become all things to all people so that we might by all means save some. That's our goal. That's our job. That's our reason for existence. That's the only reason we're left here on planet Earth. So what do we do with it? Hopefully we become all things to all people, because the people around you, the ones you know and the ones you don't know, there is some real hurt. There is some real need. And we're supposed to be the ones that are helping, not the ones making it worse. Would you stand with me? Close there in a word of prayer. Father, we love you. We're thankful for 250 years. It is an amazingly high number that we can't really grasp. Father, we're thankful for the places that you have positioned us, the lives that you have given us, the people that you have put around us. Would you help us to be aware? Would you help us to be authentic? And would you help us to allow different people within the body of Christ to be who they are, so that together we can all become all things to all men, so that we might by all means save some. Father, might that become our goal? There's a lot of challenges in that, personally, a lot of challenges in that corporately as a church. Lord, help us to embrace those challenges. Help us to figure out some answers. Help us to better become all things to all men. Help us to save some. We ask it in Jesus' good name.